and 8th special presentation.
Coming up on Artbeat Nation, a new look at the woman who let them eat cake.
Either she is a total victim of circumstance or she's the worst woman that ever, walked the face of the earth.
A painting that captures an unforgettable moment in American history.
He was hoping to really instill a drive to obtain freedom in countries around the world.
Proof that there's more to airports than planes and runways.
The airport is really a brand that represents the community.
A seasoned painter who's still exploring.
Every day that I pick up a brush or a pencil, it's a new adventure for me.
And an artist who added a playful touch to the workday commute.
People are on their way to work and, pretty focused. So to break through that's a challenge.
It's all ahead on Artbeat Nation. Funding for Artbeat Nation is made possible by contributions to 8 from viewers like you. Thank you. Legendary 18th century French Queen Marie Antoinette spent much of her life in the public eye, but for many she remains widely misunderstood. Now, the new stage production Marie Antoinette shows the Queen in a new light. Jared Bowen takes us behind the scenes.
At first, we can't help but marvel at Marie Antoinette, at her vibrant Versailles, all bright and splashy, at her sumptuous couture and towering wig, all 3 feet of it. She's a queen with the confidence to indulge, shamelessly.
In Vienna, I used to just have an espresso every day in the morning for breakfast, and then like a piece of chocolate and a biscuit, and that was it. And nobody stood around watching me eat.
Either she is a total victim of circumstance or she's the worst woman that ever, walked the face of the earth.
Brooke Bloom starred as the doomed queen in Marie Antoinette. We meet Marie just as she's a woman on the verge. She's contending with unbearable public pressure, a failing marriage to an incompetent king, and an uprising by the 99%.
You should be careful.
Of what?
The people are very angry.
Oh, they're always angry. That's not a barometer of anything.
They're starving. And they're overtaxed.
That's Louis' problem.
The court at Versailles is so insane and so bizarre. She was really like an animal in a zoo. Anyone could come in at any day and watch her eat lunch and watch her get dressed.
But figuring out the inhabitants of the court of Versailles is very much up for interpretation, says playwright David Adjmi. So he invented his own Marie.
I thought it would be more interesting not to demonize her.
Here, Marie Antoinette is a woman who can be excused for being vastly out of touch with reality, Adjmi says, considering she was essentially bred to be queen and knew nothing else.
She was part of this very, very vast, very sort of Byzantine political machinery, and she was inserted and dropped into it. And she was raised, and as she says in the play, I wasn't raised, I was built. She was built like a machine to be part of this machinery.
You have very bad manners. So I've heard.
The show casts Marie in a surprisingly resonant contemporary lens. She's vilified for her lavish lifestyle and becomes the subject of a smear campaign. She's a tabloid queen, torn from her perch, not unlike what we witnessed today, says director Rebecca Teichman.
It is meant to kind of awaken questions about our own moment and about culturally what's happening and how it's reflected in what was going on then.
Of course, the frivolity fated Marie Antoinette to a grim end. And here we see her slowly awaken to the realization that the nation that vaunted her would actually end her. And what makes this play so rich is that we feel for the fact that for so long, she didn't see it coming.
I kept thinking as I was working, like, oh my God, she's so much like Claudette Colbert in the Palm Beach Story. And I think that's what she really wanted. I mean, that's what this incarnation of Marie Antoinette wants to be. She wants to be in a Preston Sturges film and just have everything be light and frothy and fun, and you know, like we all do.
Next, some moments in history remain forever etched in our minds. For more than 2 centuries, George Washington's crossing of the Delaware River during the Revolutionary War has inspired many, including painter Emanuel Leutze. Betty Kornhauser, a curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, explains the significance of the iconic painting, Washington Crossing the Delaware.
I'm Betsy Kornhauser, the curator of American paintings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're standing in the new galleries of American painting and sculpture in the American Wing, and behind me is one of the largest paintings in the museum, a work by Emanuel Leutze called Washington Crossing the Delaware. Leutze was an American artist who spent some of his career in Germany. In fact, this great history painting was painted by Leutze in Germany at a time when he was hoping to really instill a drive to obtain freedom in countries around the world, and used the great example of our leader, George Washington, as a means of fueling this kind of patriotism and quest for freedom in Germany. He painted the work in 1851 with the intention of bringing it back to the United States, and shortly after its completion, it was on view to the public in New York City, and was hailed as a great work that looked back in time to this very important event that took place during this American Revolution. The British forces had really gained the upper hand, and Leutze decided to focus on this great turning point when Washington gathered his troops and crossed the Delaware River from Delaware toward the New Jersey shore on Christmas night of December 26, 1776, in the hopes of taking the Hessian soldiers who were in the employ of the British Army, taking them by surprise. And he's in this boat that is filled with officers and men rowing through this very difficult ice-covered river with everything going against them. But there he stands with the flag behind him, and the boat is in fact being guided by this North Star as they move toward this glorious mission. And in fact, it becomes one of the great turning points that helped the colonists to obtain freedom and win the war. It was part of a series that Leutze did, really exploring these great events which led to the new republic, the formation of the United States. And he was very careful to create a very elaborate gilt frame that has all kinds of iconic carving on it. You can see the eagle in the center up at the top. There are stars. There's actually a phrase carved into it that referred to Washington's heroism as this great mythic figure. And he wanted it to be a really awesome painting in every way. You might notice that the boat is probably over-peopled with soldiers. It probably wasn't really historically accurate, but Leutze's intent was really to create a theatrical rendition of this heroic event. And so he wanted you to be really dazzled by the scene rather than sticking very strictly to historical accuracy. We've decided in our gallery to install it in the way in which it was hung during the height of the Civil War. In 1864, here in New York City, there was an event called the Sanitary Fair. It was Abraham Lincoln's effort to raise money for the Union Army wounded. And during the fair, there was a great gathering of art. This painting was centered in a very important focal point, and it was flanked by works by members of the Hudson River School. To the left, Frederick Church's Heart of the Andes, and to the right, Albert Bierstadt's Rocky Mountain Landers Peak. So in our gallery here, we flanked our great Leutze history painting with the work by Church and by Albert Bierstadt in the positions they were in during this Sanitary Fair. I'm Betsy Kornhauser, curator of American paintings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I invite you to come and see our new galleries of American paintings and sculpture and to view the Leutze in its grand new location.
To learn more about the painting, visit metmuseum.org. Walk through any airport this holiday season and you'll find people anxious to reach their destinations. But take a minute to look around and you may see that a team of architects and artists have worked to prove that there's beauty in the journey as well as the destination. An exhibition at the Denver Art Museum shows us how.
Airports can be a gateway, and they can be a gateway in a majestic and dramatic way. The airport is really a brand that represents the community. It's the first thing you see and the last thing you see when you go to a place. Art and architecture matter, and it affects your life. It affects your life in many ways. And so what we have in the design of airports is applied art and applied science.
I think Fentress is really showing how airports can be unique, uplifting, and exciting spaces. Using technology and innovation to sort of create these very unique spaces that are very different from the airports that I knew when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, that almost became these long, low corridors filled with fluorescent light and almost were people processors. The goal of the exhibition in pulling together the specific works that you see in the gallery was to reveal the creative process of the design of airports. And so you'll see things like sketches, the use of digital animation to move through spaces, bringing these spaces into the third dimension with a lot of the models. I think it's really difficult to typically exhibit architecture in an art museum in that you can't show the buildings themselves. So we often grapple with the different ways of representing these spaces. It's a really interesting way of getting our visitors into these spaces without actually going to an airport itself.
Travel has become a gruesome experience. The number of people traveling and the hustle and bustle and the size of the planes and the loading and unloading. So we as architects do everything we possibly can to make the passengers' experience a pleasant experience. And we do that by bringing daylight into the building. We try to reduce the walking distances, have amenities that are really interesting. When we're designing an airport, we think of our touchstones of design, which are things like bring the context into the design of the building and celebrate the entrance to the building. We try to capture the culture and the place. We use natural materials from that area, and we capture something from the history of that place in the design of the building. A part of trying to capture the essence of a place is researching the area and understanding what's special about this place. The North Carolina project that we did in Raleigh-Durham, we used laminated wood beams inside the building because that area is about crafts and hardwoods. In San Jose, California, we used the inspiration of the computer cable being unfurled and unrolled because that's Silicon Valley. When we were designing the Denver International Airport terminal, I had this kind of idea that I wanted it to relate to the mountains somehow. So when we got involved in fabric for the roof of the building, it just came very naturally that we were able to design it with peaks and valleys, and it really related to the mountains. Although some people look at it and say it looks more like teepees. With the Denver airport, we started a whole new genre of things that are going on in airport design around the world, where now everyone wants their airport to relate to the place and be emblematic of that place. Architecture matters. It shapes your environment in ways that you never thought. It shapes how you move through a space, the way you sit in a space, the way daylight comes into the space. And all of these things we take into consideration when we're designing a building. And we do it in a way to try to make it a pleasurable experience for people.
To find out more about the architecture of airports and the Denver Art Museum's exhibition, visit FentressArchitects.com. Next, meet a painter who credits his success to trusting his instincts. As a college student, Gregory Kondos earned a C in his color class. Now a celebrated California landscape artist, his work has been called a visual feast. reporter Rob Stewart takes us to his studio.
We are in one of the private studios of renowned artist Gregory Kondos. Gregory, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us in your home and in your private studio here. You are one of the most well-respected artists, particularly landscape artists, of our time.
Thank you.
How do you do this?
Well, luckily I was born in a family that had a lot of love. My father, he said, "What do you want to be?" I looked at him and I said, "I want to be an artist." He figured, I'd say doctor, lawyer, or something. So he looked at me and he says, "Go for it." And that was it. Well, I just felt that I had to succeed somehow. Every day that I pick up a brush or a pencil, it's a new adventure for me. And I know when to quit. I know when a painting is finished or a pencil, I think. But in the meantime, I'm learning. So I'm very proud to say that I'm still a student.
Gregory, when did you know that you had this gift?
It was late. If you're led by others, you may be years in correcting what they've told you. For example, in college, I got a C in color. And I told the teacher that it's not fair because I know I'm a good colorist. And then 2 years later, when I graduated, I taught that class. So, there it is. It's
I think you won.
Well, I'll tell you, Rob, it's if you have enough confidence in yourself, you don't need somebody else to tell you that you are a good colorist or you can draw well. You'll see it eventually. One time, this is a funny one, years ago, I was asked in an interview on television if Cezanne, he's my mentor, by the way, Cezanne, if he was right here, what would you do? I said, what a stupid question. And I said, I'm going to answer that. I said, if Cezanne was right here, I'd open up his mouth, I'd reach down his throat and pull his heart out.
Oh.
And then right there in that cavity is all those beautiful paintings.
Wow.
And so I said, that's enough for me,
Wow. You taught for decades, and I'm just really curious, as we look around this studio filled with just breathtaking paintings, is this something that you can teach?
With patience. I hope I can, through our interview, make young people who are destined to be painters or want to be painters, be patient. It doesn't come all of a sudden. You've got to experience all these wins and losses, and you've also got to get up in the morning and say, I'm a student, and that's it. And I will die a student. That's it. This is so personal that when people look at your art, you can make them happy, because if you have a color sense and you can draw well or whatever, they come around and they praise and so forth. I wish I can keep all my work,
When you're painting, what are you feeling?
Tired. Because it's magic. I want people to enjoy my paintings. And if anything comes out of this, it's somebody that can hang it once in a while out there properly and have other people come by and even criticize it. I don't like to be called an artist. I am a painter. And when you talk to me about who are you, I'm a painter. I'm a die-hard landscape painter, and I'm going to be one of the few ones left. I'm still young. I'm 86, and so, and I feel very, very lucky. Remember, I was a C student in color, and then I overcame that somehow. I was never a C student, damn it. was always...
You get the last word. Well, Gregory Kondos, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
Painter and mentor.
That's a good ending.
To see more paintings by Gregory Kondos, visit gregorykondos.com. For more than 25 years, the New York Subway Arts for Transit program has transformed the underground stations into a canvas for public art. Here's a look at the work of artist Tom Otterness.
I loved to be able to pitch to such a hardcore New York audience down the subway. It meant that I could pull out my blackest humor and I'd have some takers. You know, it is a hard audience to sell to, and people are on their way to work and, you know, pretty focused. So to break through that's a challenge. I usually try to make something that's subject specific, you know, so I went back immediately and did research on the building of the subways in the late 19th century and sort of the political era of the time, Tammany Hall, and I ran across Thomas Nast's work, the famous political cartoonist from that period, and I grabbed a lot of stuff, came straight from Nast, the Moneybag Head people, corruption. Almost all the projects start with drawing. And it's a very simple kind of, it's almost an animation style of drawing, you know, that I can make my original, you know, I can make these figures and this idea of tubular arms and hands. I have types for these guys, you know, they're all in different social classes. This guy's like a white-collar guy. Do you have pants? I guess. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in that subway. I spent time drawing the telephones that existed there, or the loudspeakers, or people and how they would sit and hang out in the subways. I actually built a full-scale model of a staircase and an overhead beams and the railings and everything in my studio. So there was some really meticulous planning. But then when you actually get out on site, not all of it goes out the window, but certainly some of it does, and you have to respond to the real situation there. I think it's one of my talents, you know, the placing of work in this kind of Zen garden way, you know, or the unexpected. It's both a surprise and it's a nook or it's a cranny that you don't expect. Eye contact is really important for me, so that I would be sure that you would have eye contact when you're walking up the stairs, or that one work would look to another across the space. There are a few pieces that ask you to engage with it, you know. New Yorkers are very cool. It depends, you know, usually they'll sit next to it, but they're not often touching it, you know. They'll kind of like, I'm not really being affectionate to this sculpture. I'm just sitting here because it's an empty seat. I think I set a record. It was, the project went over a 10-year period. I kept adding more and more work, and far beyond what I was under contract for. You know, I kept throwing more and more bronze in, the more excited I got. And finally my wife said, that's it. You know, you got to like save something for our daughter's inheritance, and she kind of pulled me in. When I'm depressed, I go take a detour in the subway and go over to 14th Street and get out and just spend 15 minutes, and somebody's always there doing something with the work. And I think, what's my problem? Everything's okay. I get back in the subway and I go on my way. You know, it's one of the big payoffs of doing public work, is just to see that all the time.
To see more of his art, visit tomostudio.com. For more arts and culture, visit azpbs.org/artbeat, where you'll find featured videos and information on the Arizona art scene. Funding for Artbeat Nation was made possible by contributions to AIF from viewers like you. Thank you.